Fictional characters are fascinating. They can serve as wish fulfillment fantasies, parodies of real people, and vehicles of inspiration. The fact that a non-existent entity can motivate anyone to do anything is a peculiar concept, but it's a concept that I sometimes take for granted. A mere fraction of a story can have just as great of an impact on someone as the entire story itself. And that's why my favorite part of any given story is the cast who comprises it. As a tribute to these inspiring souls in the world of anime, I present to you my top 10 anime characters of all time. Full disclaimer, this video will not be limited to a single character per show. Replacing my favorites with inferior stand-ins for the sake of diversity would defeat the entire purpose of this list. Also, keep in mind that these are my opinions and mine alone. So you should obviously take them as gospel to mold your own lives around, you filthy peasants. Nicholas D. Wolfwood looked like a shady guy from the outset, so when he would suddenly appear to work alongside Vash the Stampede, and then disappear as quickly as he had arrived, I couldn't help but distrust him. As the show progressed, however, I gradually became increasingly invested not only in Wolfwood as a character, but in his perspective that boldly contrasted that of Vash. Whereas Vash was dead set on pacifism in spite of the carnage and suffering that constantly followed him, Wolfwood was willing to murder those who, if spared, would only harm more innocent people. This moral juxtaposition between the two men made them fascinating to watch. If they weren't kicking ass and taking names, they were bickering over how they should combat their enemies. In any case, this dynamic duo was delightful to watch, until Wolfwood's dark secret was finally revealed. It turns out that Wolfwood was, in fact, working for the big baddies all along. By the time this information took shape, however, Vash had already altered Wolfwood's view of the world. Wolfwood realized that his previous mindset was flawed, and that his entire life up to this point had been desecrated by this dreadful ideology. After betraying Vash, Wolfwood ultimately chose to defy his superiors in an effort to atone for his sins. In doing so, however, Wolfwood was gravely wounded. Before his inevitable death, he tells Vash, "Man is born a mortal being, and we all make mistakes. That's a part of the game." Vash says that he struggles to accept the mistakes that he made, to which Wolfwood replies, "Then you can choose to suffer. That's also a part of the game." His death is a major turning point in Trigun's narrative. Up until this point, Vash and Wolfwood have refused to change their ways, and this stubbornness leaves a path of destruction trailing behind them. Vash's tragic undoing would occur just one episode later, but unlike Wolfwood, Vash is able to act upon his failures to move forward. When Wolfwood dies, he bears the full burden of the sins that he can never atone for. In his final moments, Wolfwood wonders if every decision he's ever made in his life was a mistake, and he laments that there is still so much that he has to do in the world. It's one of the most crushing scenes I've ever witnessed. Yet, even in spite of that, a subtle inkling of hope penetrates this scene. Though Wolfwood's journey may be over, his message lives on through Vash. And when Vash eventually commits his own sin, we realize that neither man had the correct frame of mind. There is no perfect solution. Not everyone can be spared, but not everyone has to die either. Mercy is a core motivation for many a heroic character, and narratives like a Kamina Kill have been crafted around the anti-heroic idea of killing those who cannot be saved. Trigun's narrative suggests that neither pure mercy nor pure mercilessness are feasible solutions for humanity. People can reform, but conversely, there also will come a day where one man isn't strong enough to spare everyone. Humans aren't gods, and they shouldn't try to be. We are imperfect beings, and we must come to terms with this so we can move forward. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in an endless cycle of destruction. In a world filled with average human beings, the exceptional take charge. In a world with exceptional human beings, the average are left in the dust. To some, those who are born with an innate set of skills are destined for greatness, while those who aren't will forever remain at the bottom. This is a mindset that Rock Lee adamantly attempts to defy through sheer grit and determination. The world of Naruto consists of 3 core battle techniques: ninjutsu, the combination of spiritual energy and physical attacks; genjutsu, the crafting of illusions; and taijutsu, the maximum amplification of raw human abilities. In Naruto, the typical ninja uses a combination of these 3 techniques to win their battles. Rock Lee is not a typical ninja, however. Lee is completely inept at mastering ninjutsu or genjutsu. To compensate for this weakness, Lee has no choice but to focus all of his time and energy into taijutsu. Only by pushing his body to its absolute limit does Lee manage to hold his own against his peers. His training methods are quite frankly, insane. We see an example of this during his fight with Gaara. You see those training weights? Fairly simple stuff so far. Nothing out of the, oh my god, as if that wasn't enough. Lee is able to push his body beyond its limits for a brief period of time, in which he proceeds to hand Gaara his sandy ass. No one had even laid a hand on Gaara before this match, and here's Lee, the underdog failure, wiping the floor with him. Does hard work trump natural talent when talent doesn't work hard? Lee puts up a hell of an argument that it does. Unfortunately, he loses the fight in the end, and he loses badly. Even in defeat, however, Lee exits the fight as he entered it, with an undying will to win. This launches him into a depressing arc where he has to cope with the possibility that he may never fight again. His only way back into the shinobi world is to undergo a life-threatening surgery that, even if he survives it, he might not fully recover from. Lee could have been higher on this list if his character arc had actually fucking finished. Instead, he got hurt, played a limited role in the Sasuke retrieval arc, and then disappeared from relevancy for the rest of the story. Thanks, Kishimoto. What? Kamina's only at number 8? But he's in the thumbnail. How could you do this? Kamina is one of the most iconic characters in the history of anime. Without Kamina, there is no Gurren Lagann. He cuts an intimidating figure, his actions are bombastic, and his over-the-top speeches are as cartoony as they come. Kamina is the epitome of a larger-than-life character. Each decision he makes impacts every inch of the world he's a part of. He's the leader who everyone admires. He's the man young boys wish they could be. He's a stubborn knucklehead who never backs down to anyone or anything. He's the badass leader of Team Gurren, the mighty Kamina. Just reminiscing about the grandiose way in which he presents himself is enough to get me fired up. Kamina's appeal has been chronicled on the internet, and I won't deny that the legend himself is a big inspiration for me as well. I can't take everything about him as a code to live by, though. Alexander made a video about the mature themes in Gurren Lagann, and in that video, he talked about how the world of Gurren Lagann is an idealistic realm where the improbable is possible. That's why a character like Kamina can thrive, even if his reckless abandon would be much less successful in the real world. Though he dies in roughly the first third of the series, his ideological presence remains at the forefront during the rest of the show. What's more is that his death radically changes the trajectory of the series. The plot comes to a complete halt for several episodes until the gang finally comes to terms with Kamina's demise. As if that wasn't enough, Kamina's presence played an astronomical role in shaping another beloved character of mine. But we'll get to that character in a bit. Unlike most characters, Killua doesn't strive to attain some sort of grand objective. He isn't out to be the strongest. He doesn't want to surpass the protagonist. His only goal is to be friends with Gon. That might sound boring on paper, but don't underestimate the beauty and simplicity. Killua's adventures with Gon were an absolute blast to watch, and it's this dynamic duo that carries the majority of Hunter x Hunter through its runtime. Instead of serving as Gon's foil, Killua basically became Gon's other half. Gon makes the rash, stubborn decisions, and Killua is always there to back him up or rein him in when he's gone too far. One of my favorite scenes in Hunter x Hunter comes during the Yorknu arc, when Killua tries to fight his instincts by confronting Nobunaga head-on so Gon can escape the Phantom Troop's hideout. Gon responds by smacking Killua in the back of the head and telling him not to act selfishly. Gon says that he's allowed to act that way because he's stupid, but Killua isn't. It's Gon's job to say crazy things, and Killua is supposed to stay cool and stop him. Despite how childishly dumb that statement is, it's strangely level-headed from Gon to suggest it. This role reversal is somehow both natural, yet totally self-aware at the same time. Besides going against his family's wishes, Killua's only autonomous action comes after over 130 episodes when Gon is incapacitated. He takes it upon himself to free Alluka from his family's clutches to heal Gon's injuries, but doing this creates a new ambition for Killua to strive for. Now, Killua has something to protect, and this eventually causes the two friends to go their separate ways. From his design, to his attitude, to his backstory, to his Nen ability, everything about Killua screams cool. He can even make a yo-yo look badass. But while being cool is impressive, that's merely a fraction of an interesting character. What really makes someone memorable is their ability to drop that cool exterior and display genuine vulnerability. Killua may be Gon's better half, but his twisted childhood has left him with some deep scars. While he may have been guiding Gon closer to Jing, Gon similarly led Killua to his destination. Watching the two boys go their separate ways was satisfying in that they finally found what they were searching for, but sad in that it closed such an important and entertaining chapter of their lives. No matter where these two go, I'll be thoroughly invested. I already described the incredible tag team that is Gon and Killua, and while that dynamic is a major part of Killua's arc, Gon has a bit more to dig into. Gon is the embodiment of humanity's good nature. He's kind and polite, loyal and outgoing, and though he may be simple-minded, he's not as stupid as you might think. As the Chimera Ant arc proves, however, Gon isn't perfect. He and Killua get in way over their heads, and the fear, guilt, and anger Gon feels gradually combines to push him beyond his breaking point. The result is what Super Eyepatch Wolf dubbed the Reverse Super Saiyan transformation. Gon stakes his entire life on a massive surge in power that allows him to obliterate one of the Chimera Ant King's royal guard. While the Super Saiyan transformation erupts with a heroic golden glow, Gon's transformation shrouds him in a frightening black fog. Nothing about this massacre is admirable or inspiring. If it wasn't for Killua and Aluka, Gon would have died because of this transformation. This emphasizes the weaknesses that most shonen protagonists lack. Gon isn't meant to be a power fantasy fulfillment vehicle. As such, he can and does lose. And even when he dominates this fight against Pito, he loses the moral battle. Gon's journey in the Chimera Ant arc is nothing short of masterful. I witness his story firsthand, so of course I want to see him destroy Pito. By the time he gets a chance to act, however, those actions no longer feel heroic. They aren't unjustified, but seeing how the two characters treat a dying Komugi flips the situation into a frenzy. He betrays not only the audience, but his entire character as well. Gon's attitude towards his father was another point of interest. In the West, abandoning your kid to pursue your own goals would make you a bad parent. As such, most children in Gon's situation would feel spiteful towards their father. Gon doesn't. Instead, that fact serves as his strongest motivation. He's not interested in his father abandoning him, he's interested in why he did so. Gon harbors no ill will toward his father, so neither do I. This point serves to reinforce Gon's innocence and optimism, and I'm a sucker for both of those character traits. I guess creating an adventure full of wonder and expansion wouldn't really work with a cynical pessimist, would it? A bad protagonist can drag down a great show, but a great protagonist can make a quality show phenomenal. And that's exactly what Gon does. It only takes half an episode to gain a basic understanding of who A-chan is. A diligent straight-A student who lives and breathes by a strict schedule. He's something of a small celebrity in that regard, so much so that even his notes are considered to be more useful than textbooks by his classmates. A-chan isn't unique because of his intelligence, though. In fact, it's quite the opposite. First impressions of the guy make him seem like a genius. But A-chan actually isn't all that bright. Instead, he compensates for his lack of brilliance with an almost robotic work ethic. His notes are merely a taste of how organized and detailed he is about his life as a whole. Even this minor shot of his lunch highlights just how precise and calculated his daily routine is. But he doesn't act this way because he enjoys it. Quite frankly, A-chan isn't excited about anything. He only invests so much time into studying because that's what kids are supposed to do. Fun is an alien concept to A-chan. He initially only takes up tennis as a way to stay fit. There's no passion behind his decision. He just gets roped into it. Before he can give it up, though, he learns of Natsu's ambition to become a professional tennis player. What I loved about this scene is how it sparked a genuine interest in A-chan. This isn't a girl that he's currently infatuated with, nor is tennis something that A-chan ever dreamed of pursuing. A-chan is so fascinated by Natsu's love for tennis that two separate facets of his character arc begin with this one scene: his journey with tennis and his relationship with Natsu. This scene alone is noteworthy, simply for how organic it feels. A lesser show would have used the love interest as a way to drag the protagonist into the sport, or used the sport as a way to bring the protagonist closer to the love interest. In baby steps, however, Achan has no real investment in either, which makes this moment, and the results of it, all the more powerful. When Achan does eventually become attracted to Natsu, it doesn't feel contrived. Achan has become just as passionate about tennis as Natsu, and it's through that connection that Achan grows more attached to her. One of my favorite lines comes in episode 3 when Achan's best friend, Kageyama, asks him if he likes Natsu. Not only does that knowledge dawn on Achan himself, but Kageyama replies with, "I'm just so happy. You're actually human." There's a gag that follows where Achan asks himself, what does it mean to like someone? To find an answer, he literally grabs a dictionary and looks for a definition until his mother enters the room. I couldn't help but laugh at how naive this kid is. Then, in episode 6, despite getting absolutely crushed in his first match, Achan realizes just how much fun he has while playing tennis. He's not saddened by the loss itself, but by the ramifications of that loss being that he can no longer compete against other players in that tournament. Achan finally finds something that he's not only passionate about, but he actually has a talent for. School never came easily to him, but in tennis, Achan has a gift that, with experience, could potentially make him an elite player. His keen eyesight is one thing, but his meticulous, calculative lifestyle allows him to accurately measure intricate mathematical details of the game. As an untrained rookie, Achan could give one of the top players in the tournament a rough time. Even without the skill, Achan might have pushed his opponent into a corner if he had better stamina. Flaws like this only emphasize the nuances of Achan's character. In my video on My Hero Academia, I compared Izuku, an unconditioned, bottom-of-the-barrel underdog, to Gon and Killua, two naturally gifted fighters who, while weaker than a majority of their adversaries, had an incredible potential for growth. Both of these dynamics are incorporated into Achan's character without clashing against each other. On one hand, Achan's eyes and methodical repetition make tennis the perfect sport for him. On the other, Achan has next to no athleticism, and he lacks the same experience for the craft that someone like Killua has for fighting. So while Achan could become a top tennis player eventually, he still fits into the underdog role that I so fondly love. On top of that, I can totally empathize with this scene of Achan getting fired up about the possibility that he could one day become great. It's here that Achan's passion finally takes center stage. Tennis is not just a hobby, it's an obsession. Tennis has become to Achan what YouTube has become to me. I've been in Achan's shoes before. When I first started making videos in 2012, I was clueless. Only after 3 years did I finally start making content that I can still be proud of. That wasn't due to a lack of effort either. YouTube was my life outside of high school, not unlike tennis is for Achan. I've been at this for over 4 years with marginal success, but I keep moving forward nonetheless. That's why this scene resonates so strongly with me. I want to see Achan fulfill his dreams as badly as I want to fulfill my own. Shortly before I started watching the show back in March, I came to a groundbreaking crossroads in my life. A shocking realization that had silently been building in the background for over a year finally came to the surface. I didn't want to attend college. I wanted to drop out and pursue a full-time career making YouTube videos. Growing up, I had always thought that college was my only path. Do well in school, to get a college degree, and find a successful job in the field. This had been my mindset for my entire childhood, even after I had been making YouTube videos for nearly 4 years in high school. During that time, however, I grew more and more attached to my channel and the work that came with it. At first, I thought that only the select few people who had started years before could make a living off of YouTube. As the months of creating content turned into years, however, I started forming what I thought of as a dumb pipe dream, a shot in the dark chance that maybe, just maybe, YouTube could one day become my job. It was only in my senior year that I actually thought it in the realm of possibility, and even then, I had no reason to believe that I could pull it off. I was making videos about wrestling video games after all. How the fuck would I gain a substantial audience from that? As I gradually learned more about the platform and anime analysis, however, that prospect seemed less and less like a stupid fantasy. I like anime. I like analysis. But am I any good at it? I had been tossing around the idea of making my own analytical content as early as last summer, and I finally gave it a go in late January with my top 5 AMVs of all time video. That led to the launch of this channel, and now I'm here, less than a month away from the end of my first and last year at college, reading this script to you from my laptop screen. So what does this personal anecdote have to do with Achan? Well, Achan and I share a similar journey. Achan had also dedicated the majority of his childhood to his studies, but unlike me, Achan wasn't quick-witted. He had to take notes, study, and go to cram school just so he could maintain his straight A's. If I had been that motivated, I probably could have ranked near the top of my class too, but I wasn't that invested in school. The odd thing is though, Achan wasn't passionate about school either. He didn't agonize over his studies because he liked doing it. He did so because he thought that he had to. Because this is the case, Achan has so much more to lose when he decides to quit cram school to focus solely on becoming a pro tennis player. He isn't naturally bright like I was, and his grades suffer because of his sudden priority shift. Another difference is that, while I'm approaching my 5th year on YouTube as I make my decision, Achan had only been playing tennis for about a year when he confronted his family about it. In that regard, I at least had some semblance of vindication for my actions, no matter how small it was. Achan has nothing other than his passion and his word. His situation could be considered less risky since he's still in high school and has a safe plan B, but having to sacrifice his newfound love for tennis in favor of more school doesn't exactly sound promising. My connection to Achan is strengthened even further by the arguments he goes up against, like, you could focus on your studies and still play tennis in your free time. While that would be the more rational choice in the grand scheme of things, where's the fun in shoving your passions aside to pursue something less interesting as a career path? Achan and I are very cautious people. We play it safe 99% of the time, but sometimes you have to act out of character and take risks if you want to win big. You might suffer the biggest loss that way, but you'll only ever attain your goals by throwing everything that you've got at them, and that's exactly what Achan does. He busts his ass to try and catch up to his peers. And while he still has a mountain to climb before he can reach the top, he's covered plenty of ground already. He stumbles a lot, but he always gets back up. If I had to hold anything against him though, it would probably be the Season 1 climax.
Why the fuck didn't you confess to her?
You had 2 chances to do it, you punk bitch motherfucker. Most narratives are structured around an opening catalyst, a turning point in the protagonist's life where the status quo gets disrupted by an external force. As such, it's generally the antagonist who fights for change, while the protagonist attempts to uphold the current system. This dynamic is the central point in most Western media, and other anime like Psycho-Pass and Trigun do an excellent job of using this concept to the fullest. When it comes to Shonen Jump and other battle shows of its ilk, however, this trope is reversed about as often as it is played straight. One approaches both of these perspectives in his webcomics. The world of One Punch Man is shaped by its protagonist reacting to the various circumstances around him, and Mob Psycho 100's narrative is constructed around the main character's motivation for self-improvement. Mob Psycho 100 emphasizes character growth, but that wouldn't have catapulted Mob Psycho into my top 5 if it wasn't for how goddamn lovable its protagonist is. Shigeo Kageyama, better known as Mob, is a boring person. He lacks any social skills, and he rarely shows any emotion. What he does possess, however, is an incredible psychic power that, as far as we know, would make him the most destructive character in the story. Contrary to most wish fulfillment vehicles, however, these abilities are not what define Mob. What makes Mob such a gratifying character to watch is how he treats his powers. If this were a typical light novel, Mob's powers would make him an all-conquering badass who all the ladies fall for. Mob has no such luck in this narrative. His powers mean nothing in service of his ultimate goal. Mob wants to make connections with people and impress the girl he likes, but she isn't interested in his telekinetic prowess. She likes guys who work out. So what does Mob do? He joins the Body Improvement Club. In the hands of any other character, these psychic powers would be the ultimate tool in achieving control, popularity, you name it. Instead of relying on a single defining trait though, Mob strives to strengthen his flaws and become an all-around better person. He doesn't abuse his gift. In fact, he's actually afraid of it. Part of the reason why Mob has such a boring personality is attributed to his inability to deal with his emotions. Mob's power operates in conjunction with his mental state, and as he loses control of his feelings, his powers become more unstable. Because of this, Mob bottles everything up, but all that does is worsen the issue when he inevitably hits his breaking point. What this creates is an insecure, yet proactive teenager who strives for self-improvement. It's simple, but these distinguished flaws make Mob an incredibly sympathetic character. I want to watch him succeed, and I can't help but be inspired by his willingness to ignore his gifts and address his flaws without any unreasonable cynicism. Mob is a true hero, one that we should all aspire to. Not all con artists are bad people. What happens if you take a dishonest practice and put it in the hands of an actual role model, you get Reigen. I'd hesitate to call Reigen an honest man, because he does have his nuances, but the sheer amount of legitimate advice that he provides throughout Mob Psycho's runtime is staggering. While I love heroes and the stereotypical good person, I'm also fascinated by characters who operate in morally gray areas. Reigen uses his godlike charisma and nefarious scheming to manipulate his clients, but if he didn't, those people would fall into the clutches of a more dastardly con man. In Reigen's defense, he can at least solve whatever problem his customers have under the false pretense of performing some sort of spiritual exorcism or summoning. You know, the kind of BS that his moronic clients would actually buy into. That alone, while devious, is admirable. What puts Reigen in this high a position, however, are his actions at the climax of the Claw arc. After unintentionally fooling a bunch of peons into thinking that he is their boss, Reigen infiltrates the 7th Division's lair and finds himself face to face with a group of elite espers. A hilarious sequence of events unfolds, but Reigen eventually realizes that he's in over his head. Though Reigen is virtually incapable of losing an argument against another adult, the Scars are, as described by Reigen himself, a group of children who never grew up. Their telekinetic prowess has given them delusions of grandeur that blind them to reality, which prevents Reigen from reasoning with them. It seems like the only way to defeat the Scars is to let Mob unleash his full powers, and the murderous intent that comes with it. But just before Mob flips his switch, Reigen stops him. This spurs a surprisingly heartwarming flashback to when Mob and Reigen first met. Though his motivations in this scene are somewhat shallow, Reigen provides Mob with plenty of genuine life advice. You can tell that he wants to get rid of the naive kid, but he still cares enough to help the little guy out. This is what makes Reigen such a brilliant con man. He plays on the ignorance of others, yes, but he does what a typical swindler wouldn't, and that's actually help his clients. Reigen isn't exactly humble, but his sole motivation isn't his own self-gain either. His overall message, become a good person, isn't groundbreaking by any means, but the steps he takes in getting to that point are what make him stand out. To Reigen, psychic powers are the same thing as speed, strength, intelligence. They're all just characteristics. In his mind, individuals shouldn't define themselves by a single characteristic. This practice breeds arrogance, when in reality, everyone is just a commoner. No one man is greater than any other. Fortunately, Reigen is able to break through to the Scars after Mob transfers his 100% power to his master. With Mob's power backing him, Reigen is able to overwhelm Claw's 7th Division. This sudden burst of power helps his message finally sink in. Look at how powerful I am, he says, and I'm just a commoner. If I'm just an average human being, what does that make you guys? It's ironic that Mob Psycho's most thought-provoking quotes would come from the guy who often bullshits his way in and out of trouble. When Reigen says that he's going to show Mob how to use his powers, he's obviously lying so he can exploit those powers for his own benefit. By the end of the show, however, Reigen has helped Mob understand his powers. He might be simple-minded, but Mob genuinely admires Reigen, and he takes his master's ironically humble advice to heart. Reigen is what we pro wrestling marks would call living the gimmick. He upholds his charismatic persona at all times, and by doing so, he becomes a truly iconic character. In that regard, Reigen is Mob Psycho's Kamina. He shows brief flashes of his weaker side, but when it matters most, Reigen is always in control. I already made an entire video about Izuku, so I won't waste time repeating myself. I originally held off on writing this list because there was a good chance that Izuku would surpass my number 1 if I gave the series more time. After I got into a few discussions in the comments of that video though, I realized a fundamental flaw in Izuku's conception that would ultimately prevent him from ever surpassing my number 1. Despite having to bust his ass, Izuku's reward isn't a strength that he created within himself. It's a strength that was given to him by All Might. I personally believe that Izuku does deserve his spot at UA. He worked hard, and he continued to work hard after receiving his quirk. Never once did he rest on his laurels or develop any sense of arrogance. So even though One for All could be seen as a cheap cop-out, I firmly object that it isn't. What this new ability does grant Izuku, however, is a place in society that he otherwise would not be capable of existing in. No matter how hard Izuku pushed himself during his 10-month training period, he would not have acquired the power to pass the exam in time. The idea that Izuku defied the odds and overcame societal barriers to achieve his dreams regardless of the circumstances he was born into doesn't hold the same weight when his reason for defying those odds is based on the power that All Might transferred to him. That isn't to suggest that Izuku's success stems solely from this power, though. Because Izuku has spent so much time studying other heroes and improving his mental skills, he's a master tactician. He often relies strictly on his quick thinking and the resources he has at his disposal. Izuku is well aware that he can't control his quirk, so he avoids using it unless he has no other choice. One for All may be a detriment to Izuku on a conceptual level, but I wouldn't say that it's a detriment to the show's overall narrative. I like the idea of a common man's quirk that allows a single, non-naturally talented human who embodies the true meaning of a hero to not only stand among the top heroes, but to set the standard for what young children should aspire to. The underdog story is still there, and I so badly want the remaining material to expand on that concept. Sometimes, life levels your foundation and leaves you at square one. Izuku was born into the lowest tier in society. He's an average kid in an extraordinary world, but with the help of All Might and his new comrades, Izuku's once intangible dream is slowly becoming a potential reality. Will he ever be the boy who single-handedly bucked the laws of his world to achieve the impossible? No. Even in spite of his foundational shortcomings, though, Izuku's journey still resonates strongly with me. This is because Izuku doesn't sacrifice any humility after he obtains a quirk. Arrogance is a product of success, and it's all too easy for people to get overwhelmed by it if they lack experience with success. That doesn't happen to Izuku. In fact, he occasionally doubts himself because of his new power. I've struggled with my own insecurity on a daily basis ever since I was a child. This video is itself a microcosm of that battle. I rewrote several parts of this script, including this one, because I wasn't satisfied with my original work. Growing up, I didn't want to be noticed. Before I started making videos in 2012, my goal was to be just another face in the crowd. Once I realized that this was a hobby that I wanted to invest in, however, it became obvious that trying to be an average Joe wasn't gonna work. As a result, I've had to almost completely redefine myself in a similar way to how Izuku has had to evolve. I spent 4 years honing my skills on another channel, but I haven't even hit 10,000 subscribers there. Suffice it to say that the support this channel has gotten so far is unexpected. While I only needed to reshape my mind, however, Izuku must transform both his mental and physical features. His new power doesn't instantly grant his wishes either. He still has to scratch and claw his way to the top, and face the problems that his new status and untrained abilities garner him. He may have tasted success, but he damn sure hasn't gotten comfortable or lazy. I gave a speech at my high school graduation, but that won't do jack shit for me if I don't continue to better myself. If Izuku can go beyond his limits, so can I. Honorable mentions! By now, you should have noticed a pattern permeating this list. Most of my favorite characters play off of each other. Mob and Reigen, Gon and Killua, Kamina and Simon. Each of these characters are made stronger by the addition of a friend or role model. A single person is limited by their own strengths and weaknesses, but character duos can expose and modify those same traits. This gives the author more breathing room to develop each individual character in greater detail. Kamina is Gurren Lagann's standout character. He's the larger-than-life hero that everyone can aspire to be, and as such, he's most people's favorite character from the show. I, on the other hand, gravitated towards his counterpart as early as the opening scene. Much like with Izuku, I see a lot of myself in Simon. He's quiet and shy. He lacks self-confidence. While Kamina commands the spotlight wherever he goes, Simon is content just standing in the background. It's no secret that Kamina played a huge role in shaping Simon's growth. Without Kamina, Simon would have remained stagnant, trapped beneath his own perspective. He needed a good kick in the ass, or in this case, a punch in the face, to push forward. Without Simon, however, Kamina would have lost any reasonable restraint that kept him alive for as long as he was. While Kamina is a constant source of inspiration and motivation in Gurren Lagann, he's also a reminder that people shouldn't strive to become carbon copies of their role models. Kamina is reckless, acting solely on his emotions rather than reason. He needs a wingman like Simon to bring him back to Earth when he's in over his head. Kamina is too stubborn to back down, and while that's an admirable attitude to have, it's a dangerous one as well. This dynamic places the duo among the strongest and most motivational partnerships in all of anime, and their impact can be felt even in newer shows like My Hero Academia. Unfortunately, Kamina does die early on in the story, and this absolutely destroys Simon along with the rest of the cast. In the handful of episodes that followed, I became more sympathetic towards Simon and less so towards the rest of the cast. I began distancing myself from the rest of Team Gurren in the same way that Simon had distanced himself. This stretch of the story was an absolute nightmare to watch. The show's brightness and color had disappeared. The other characters, especially Kitan, started pissing me off. The only reason why I kept watching was because I wanted to see Simon recover. Never before and never again has a show controlled my emotions to such a degree, and I'm not even sure that experience can be replicated. I was a young, introverted high school student at the time, so I fell into the perfect age range for this section of the show. Enough time had passed since middle school for me to realize how much of an asshole I must have been, purposefully ignoring anyone who wasn't in my close circle of friends. Yet not enough time had passed for me to gain a greater understanding of who I was, why I was, and how I could improve as a person. I felt Simon's burning desire to get stronger, to compensate for that which he lacked, to feel responsible for his own suffering. What Simon needed was for one person to believe in him without question, even when Simon lacked faith in himself. And eventually, that's exactly what he got. Nia is no Kamina, but she's a damn entertaining character herself, and a perfect successor as Simon's motivating force. Part of what made me so pissed off with the rest of Team Gurren is how they just abandoned Simon. In episode 11, Kitan calls Simon a lost cause, a spineless kid who's good for nothing but digging now. Yoko even refers to Simon as dead weight in his current state, saying that if he can't pull himself out of his funk on his own, it will be meaningless. These assertions are reasonable enough. The team has more enemies to fight after all, but it never sat well with me how they just left him to his own devices like that. Everything that they say echoes exactly what Simon himself feels. It's only because Nia never gave up on him that Simon was able to reignite the flame that fueled him. Her words finally broke through to him when he realized that he could lose her. Only then did Simon understand that he shouldn't try to be like Kamina. To be the best that he could be, Simon had to embrace his own identity and the shortcomings attached to it. His bro's memory will carry on through him, so instead of trying to be Kamina, Simon should just be Simon.
兄貴は死んだ。もういない。だけど、俺の背中に、この胸に、一つになって生き続ける。俺はシモンだ。神名の兄貴じゃない。俺は俺だ。穴掘りシモンだ。
As for the rest of his character arc, well, that's foreign territory for me. The ever-expanding scale of Gurren Lagann's world allows its characters an entire lifetime to grow, and that's something that I won't be able to empathize with for a while. Even just in terms of the time skip, I've still got years to go at best. One of these days, I will get around to rewatching Gurren Lagann. I owe characters like Kitan an experience that isn't bogged down with overdramatic emotions clouding my vision. That won't change my pure admiration for Simon, though. Nothing will. Kamina might be the man that everyone else aspires to be, but he doesn't embody anything that I could ever be. He's brave, bombastic, and brash, a natural-born leader. I'm none of those things, and neither was Simon. Still, Simon was able to persevere, and believe in the part of him that believed in himself. And as a result, he became a better man than Kamina ever was. He accepted his shortcomings, acted in spite of them, reached for the heavens, and achieved the impossible. Simon is my goal in the same way that Kamina was Simon's goal. And while my journey is still far from over, I hope to metaphorically stand beside Simon one day, as the best version of myself, with destiny in the palm of my hand. After my sappy speech in relation to A-chan, I'm sure it's no surprise that I'd be launching a Patreon. The support on these videos has been incredible so far, but if I want to make this a full-time career, I need a more stable income than just YouTube. Any help through Patreon will be greatly appreciated, but if you're not interested or if you lack the means to do so, simply watching and sharing my videos is already something that I'm immensely grateful for. This was by far my most personal video yet, and I hope you enjoyed it. It won't be often that I get a chance to be this subjective towards my subject matter, but I had a lot of fun doing it. I'll be back soon with another video, but until then, keep on YouTubing.